Hello everyone, my name is Naima. I am the owner of Nurse Naima Aesthetics operating out of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And today I am going to share some knowledge that I learnt following a very serious tattoo injury where I sustained eye injuries that led me to really investigate into my business as a cosmetic tattoo artist, and in particular my research behind pigments, which I would like to share with you today. So we're going to talk about safety profiling of cosmetic pigments. So if you're interested in getting a tattoo, or if you are a cosmetic tattoo artist, then stay tuned because you might want to hear this information. All right, so basically, oh gosh, when was it? It's probably about 2 years ago now. I received a tattoo to my eyelid, and unfortunately things went wrong and I was rushed via an ambulance, category 1, with like 20 out of 10 eye pain due to this cosmetic tattoo. Now, I was under an ophthalmologist. I'm okay now, but what that meant is I really, because I was starting my cosmetic tattoo business, so I thought, okay, well, I need to like fully just put a pause on my business and investigate, making sure I'm doing everything correct, because I do not want to cause what happened to me to other people. So I researched every single thing, and I could probably make a million videos on the things that I have learned in that process. But today I'm talking about pigments. So what I did with my cosmetic pigments is I started analyzing things. So looked at the back, and what I saw on these pigments that I received through my course, and I had bought a lot more as well because they look pretty, and I don't know, you just, when you're given it as part of your training, you kind of think, oh yeah, well that's what they use, and they create pretty brows and lips and so forth, so you just roll with it, right? It's what you're taught. But unfortunately, yeah, through my injury, I was like, stop, do your own research. And yeah, I'm glad I did, because on the back of all the bottles, it actually had not for use in the EU. And I was like, what does that mean? Because all the new ones that I just ordered said the same thing. So yeah, I researched into that, and it turns out in Australia, we do not have a regulatory body that checks the safety profiling of these pigments that we are injecting, cosmetic tattoo pigments and body art, to see if the chemicals that we're actually injecting are actually safe. So it's just too new. It's a fairly new thing, cosmetic tattooing. And same thing in America. So in the EU, that's, sorry, not the EU, in America, we look to America so much for pop culture. And we tend to just follow that. We look to them a lot for advertising and all that sort of stuff. And so a lot of what cosmetic tattoo artists are using in Australia are these American pigments, who also don't have a regulatory framework in place specifically for cosmetic tattoo pigment. So that's why we're using all these things that are actually banned in Europe. But then pose the question, well, how come Europe's doing it? How come they are doing it? And it is because they've just been around a lot longer. So they have bodies and regulatory organizations like REACH, for example, who analyze the safety data of the CIs, or like the actual chemicals that are in these pigments, to determine whether or not they pose a risk to the community. And they then ban those chemicals and components that make up the color. So I think just last year alone, they banned like 25 different compounds that go into making certain pigments, which meant that if any business had that chemical compound in them, they would need a little label that says, do not use here because our public do not want your rubbish, essentially. Now, there are also some controversies around the research too, because some of the research can be just like a little bit ambiguous, because they are more on the conservative approach with the EU. So they're like pretty hardcore. If there's one bit of study to state that, that pigment that they use, which contain that ingredient, we're just going to ban it. We're just going to ban the whole list of ingredients, because that person, that study showed it was linked to bladder cancer, which it was. I think it was a study in like 2015 or something like that. Some pigments were linked to bladder cancer. So, and there was like proper evidence, so they just went, nah, not for use here, which is kind of cool, because the good thing about cosmetic tattoo pigments is that we have lots of substitutes. So, I mean, it's up for me, because I just invested in a whole heap of pigments and I'm just starting my business. I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean I'm going to give people cancer? So I had to like pull the reins in, do my research. Thank goodness for Rob at Think Aesthetics. He's a chemical engineer who's really up into trying to push for this movement, at least here in Queensland, with Queensland Health, to try and get these pigments regulated, because, you know, there are links to it causing, you know, lymphatic flare-ups. And I'll give you an example. So it just this year, actually, the beginning of this year, there was a blue and a green that was proper banned in Europe. And that's through REACH. That's the governing body who makes all of these badass calls. And they said, no, these two compounds for colour, not for use in the EU. We do not recommend them. Not too sure if the FDA actually got wind of it. I think they might have. And there's a bit of an uproar actually with tattoo artists, because these two pigments are like basically getting taken off the shelves. And the crappy thing about that is they're very vibrant colors, and it flows onto other colors like your pinks and your purples and stuff like that, which means if there's no substitutes, which there isn't in that industry, it means the color palette that they can offer their clients is pretty damn bland, which isn't cool. But however, you know, if there are links there for some reason, like, you know, ultimately the responsibility lies on the practitioner as to whether or not you want to continue using those pigments or not, because it's in Australia, we don't have that regulatory framework, so we can keep using it. Tattoo artists can just keep using it. In Europe, you can't. And that's why I really think it's important for people, if they care about that sort of thing, to just ask the person, the cosmetic tattoo artist that they're going to go see, is it a European pigment? Or is it for use in the EU? Does it have the little, you know, thing on the back? And it's multiple brands. It's not just one or two or three. There's like multiple brands. I know, because I paid for them and I can't use them, or I chose not to use them. Yeah, and unfortunately the EU ones are a lot more expensive, and that's probably why a lot of, you know, people in Australia are just like, turn a blind eye, so to speak. It's way more expensive, European pigments, but I actually love European pigments. I think they fade so beautifully, way more natural. I personally love artist pigments. I think they're beautiful. They're made in Germany. Very, very nice retention, but also quite subtle at the same time. Well, let me share with you the reason why as well, like the chemical background. I'm not a chemical engineer by any means, but basically what happens is with these pigments, particularly like the green and the blue ink that we were talking about just before, what happens is when it contains azos, which is like nitrogen bonds that come together, and they found that through this research, when the light hits it, when it breaks down, it basically transfers into two molecules, which is your benzene, I think it's called, and your hydrogen cyanide. And those two particular molecules then directly result to immune issues and cancer and things like that. So not good. Not good. I mean, personally, if it comes to beautification, I would much rather just avoid that drama. But there's no one stopping us. So I think it's an ethical concern, particularly, you know, with elderly people who are more predisposition to, you know, people that have been in their life affected by cancer and things like that, particularly skin cancer and you know, vulnerable populations. I mean, the last thing you want to do is someone to feel good about themselves and to help their self-esteem. Go and get their eyebrows done, and you're tattooing something that's actually banned because it's a known carcinogen. You know, I mean, that's not cool. That is not cool. So there you go. There you have it. Now, if you are getting a tattoo, please don't forget to get them to do a little color swatch on your forehead to see how it settles, because it can throw different tones up against your skin tone. So please don't miss that step. I've had people come to me after getting a tattoo and it's just gone wrong. The color's just gone wrong. and you know, they're asking for my help, and I asked them if the artist did a color swatch on their skin, and they said no. So don't let just showing the artist showing you the color in the bottle or on their hand be your determining factor. No, it needs to be up against your skin, please. That will save you a lot of drama if that can happen. Now, another little myth busting thing as well, there's this thing called organic pigment or non-organic pigment. If people say my pigments are organic, please don't think that's got anything to do with being a vegan or not testing on animals and stuff like that, because that's actually not what that means. Organic just means that, because remember, pigments are chemicals. They're chemicals. So organic just means it comes from organic origin, which is carbon. So it's got the carbon foundation, and then you've got inorganic, which is your iron oxides, and then you get your carbon oxides on your organic, inorganic, iron oxides. So that's what that means, okay? It's got nothing to do with being a vegan, unfortunately. So yeah, that's what that means. And something to note as well, if you have a fear of your eyebrow tattoos fading to a red, then inorganic pigments, if they're pure inorganic, over the course of years, it might fade into your red, just so you know, because it tends to break down to its natural compounds. And then your organic one tends to break down to your more carbon ones, which is like your blue-greys. So that's why some, over the years of not having a touch-up, maintaining your brows, it can fade into that colour or that colour. But, you know, speak to a cosmetic tattoo artist who knows what they're doing, please. Unless you want to support someone new in the industry, you're a legend. Thank you. We've all been there. Love you. But just be informed, okay? Because sometimes, particularly if you use an organic pigment, it's way more saturated, so it doesn't fall out as much. So if you had the organic one, pop that on, fade into a blue-grey, the last thing you want to do is for your tattoo artist just to put more colour on top, because it's just going to look like a burnt sausage on your face, basically. And sometimes it's better just to do a colour correction in the warm red, and just see how that heals first before you go in and add more actual pigment. So yes, hopefully that helps everyone. Please stay safe. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you're interested in anything else relating to the beauty industry, then watch my next video, and I'm sure you will learn some more amazing things. Thank you. Bye.